Awesome. Yeah, I am super excited to be talking about this. Like you said, passionate about native plants. We'll talk about all that as to why and all that very soon. You'll have to forgive my voice is a little bit, sounds a little bit weird because, like she said, I'm a school naturalist. So I do nature connection classes 5 days a week with 400 plus kiddos. So I talk a lot and I talk loudly. So I'm going to do my best to keep my voice working during this. Um, so again, I am also an author, so I'll talk about a little bit about that at the end. My books are available at the library. Um, but anyway, let's get to it. So this was kind of advertised as saving the world with a milk jug. And that kind of sounds weird, but I like weird things. But I kind of discovered this not too long ago, actually. I've been kind of my quarantine self-medication, if you will, was native plants. I've been a naturalist for several years, and I've known about native plants. I know that plants, help bugs, bees, birds, all that good stuff. But this past spring, I really got into them, I guess you'd say. So I read a book by Doug Tallamy, and I highly recommend you read anything that Doug Tallamy has written. But it was called Nature's Best Hope. He's written other great books like Bringing Nature Home and all that stuff. But basically saying that we need nature and nature needs us right now. And so using milk jugs is actually a way to help. So the way I like to talk about all of this with my kiddos, so I teach like mostly 3 through 6 year olds. So I like to boil it down to a real simple way, which I think is the best way to talk about stuff. The way that I like to kind of talk about native plants and introduce them to people. Oh, I see Doug Tallamy groupie. Awesome. Me too. But the way that I like to kind of boil down native plants to people is through animal parties. So let's think about for a second a lawn. Think about, a beautiful manicured, some people think it's beautiful, manicured lawn, flat grass. And let's think about, what's happening there. Maybe a stray butterfly will fly by. Maybe if you have a couple of dandelions, you'll get some bees. But for the most part, a flat, big, open patch of grass, there's not much partying going on, not much happening. Now, let's say you decide to do what I talk about in detail here in a minute, and you plant a native plant. Let's say you go with partridge pea. I really like this plant. It's in the pea family, has some beautiful yellow flowers, these cool little seed pods. You plant that plant, and a bee comes, a fuzzy bumblebee comes and visit the flowers. A little bit later, a squirrel, a chipmunk, a deer, when they're ripened, wants to eat the seed pods. Some birds like to eat the seed pods. And so that one plant has brought a little bit of a party to your yard. Now, let's say you go big scale. I am blessed enough to have 6 acres, so I'm going pretty big. And the amount of animal parties that I have here is crazy. Any given day in the summer, I can go outside and meet 15 dragonflies. One time we had a swarm of 1,000. I can go within 2 minutes, I can go and meet a hummingbird or a bumblebee or a cute little green sweat bee or a bluebird. All these awesome animals because I have native plants. These are the plants that these animals grew up and developed to rely on. So you bring the plants and they will come. And so native plants can be as easy as throwing seed on the ground. But a lot of birds and mice and chipmunks will be very grateful for your seeds on the ground and eat them before they grow. And so in comes the milk jug. So this is technically called winter sowing. And there is a lot of awesome resources on Facebook that we'll talk about at the end for so many of your nitty gritty questions. And of course, you can ask me questions at the end today. But right now, like the main idea of winter sowing is protecting those native seeds that you put down in dirt so that the mice and the birds don't get to enjoy them early and just eat the seeds before they grow. So you might have a milk jug with you right now. You might be planning to do this later. I'm going to show you how to do it. And then I'm going to give you some great resources and some great ideas of what to do with it. So, jug. This is technically a water jug. Looks like a milk jug. We're good to go. So you're going to use this for winter sowing basically like a pot. So what you're going to do is we're going to get into this into detail, but the main idea is you're going to cut this in half, put some drain holes in the bottom, put about 4 inches of dirt. We'll talk about what kind of dirt. Put some seeds in there, close it back up with the lid off, and let it sit outside. And now you might wonder, like, why are we not growing seeds indoors, like a greenhouse, or like what's going on with that? Why do they have to sit outside in the snow, in the rain, and all of that? So any native seeds, like I said, my main focus is on natives because it makes the animal parties happen and it helps the world. So almost all native seeds need something called stratification. So what stratification means is that all seeds, and you'll see behind me, I'm kind of a mad scientist, so I've got a whole seed center going on. This is short-tooth mountain mint. This is an entire jug of black-eyed Susan seeds. But almost all these seeds need stratification, which means they have to go through a cycle of being cold and wet before they will grow. So that means they're dormant if they don't get the necessary cold and wet. So if you just keep it inside in a drawer and it never gets cold or wet and you throw it on the ground, nothing's going to happen. You could plant it and give it water and care, and nothing's going to happen if it doesn't get that stratification. So right now, we've got about 48 days until spring. So that means we're going to focus on some specific plants I'm going to recommend that you go with to join this native party that only need 30 days or so of this stratification of being cold and wet. If you were to go plant something like a wild strawberry seed right now, it needs about, I believe it's like 120 days. It's a very long time because those seeds naturally hit the ground in the summer and have the rest of the year until the following spring to sprout. So I have about 10 plants or so that I am recommending that you go with because these seeds are easy, they're easily available, and I'll tell you where to get them. And they only need about 30, some only need 10 days of this stratification. So I'm going to tell you these seeds. I'm going to show you some pictures. And then I'm going to show you exactly what to specifically do with this. And like we said at the beginning, this is going to be recorded. So if you don't have your jug right now to do the things I'm doing, that is okay. Because you can look back at this later and do it alongside of me. Again, forgive my voice. I'm going to power through. So the seeds I am recommending all will bring lots of wildlife to your yard. And I'm going to show you some pictures right now. So let me get my list up here. The first one that I love to recommend, and a lot of people talk about, is common milkweed. So common milkweed, it's called a weed. Some people don't like it, but it is critical for this guy, monarch butterflies. No milkweed, no monarchs. You may have heard in the news, Western monarchs are having really sad times. Our monarch population here in the eastern part of the US is doing better, but they still need a lot of help. So milkweed seeds are an awesome idea of what to put in these milk jugs. Like I said, we'll talk about exactly how to do that in just a minute. Now this needs full sun. It does spread pretty well. I would suggest putting it somewhere where it has lots of room to grow and spread out. It'll spread underground and pop back up. You'll have a whole patch. It'll be great for the monarchs and so many other awesome bugs come too. I had a mantid fly, looks like a bee mixed with a praying mantis, visit my milkweed this year. It was awesome. So common milkweed, great idea. Also, the Westerville Library here in 2 weeks will have a bunch of milkweed seeds available for free pickup. So you can inquire about that. Those were donated by Marty Frito. She's awesome. That should still be enough time for this stratification we were talking about. So another great one. So there's common milkweed. Like I said, that one needs 30 days. Another great one is gray-headed coneflower. This guy. This is like the go-to prairie plant. If you go to the Metro Park Prairie Oaks, there are acres of this stuff. It is amazing. The birds love the seeds, goldfinches especially. The bees, the butterflies, like meadow fritillaries, all kinds of other bugs and pollinators just love this plant. It makes crazy amount of seeds that you could collect yourself in the fall and plant even more if you want. It also loves full sun. It's going to get like 5 feet tall. But these seeds, super easy to plant. Another one that I love that I've really been getting into this year is, let me pull it out here, cut leaf coneflower. It looks very similar to what we just talked about, the gray-headed coneflower, but this cut leaf coneflower actually attracts beneficial predators, meaning that parasitoid wasps and other bugs, and those sound scary, they won't sting you, they don't care about you, but they will eat those pests in your garden. So they're going to come and sting and eat and lay eggs on all those, bugs that are going to go and eat up your tomatoes and your cucumbers and your broccoli. This plant, cutleaf coneflower, it loves having wet feet, grows up to 8 feet tall, but it will bring the bugs that will eat the bad bugs that you don't want. Awesome. All right, so another one that I really like is Joe Pie. It's not a pie. It sounds delicious. Don't eat it. But this is Joe Pie. It has these big, beautiful fireworks of pink on top. It'll also spread, and it is a pollinator magnet. I mean, every kind of buzzing, fuzzy bee, every kind of butterfly you can think of, they love it. It wants full sun. It kind of wants to be a little bit wet. You can keep it watered, of course, to make it wet. This can grow like 7 feet tall. Awesome. Another great one, grows along the side of the road a lot. Boneset. Some people call it boneset. Some people call it boneset. I've called it boneset. Whatever floats your boat. But this is a white flower, meaning it'll also bring a bunch of those bugs that'll eat the bad bugs. So that is exciting. It blooms a little bit later. So this will give your garden some excitement in the fall. But I highly recommend boneset. It's awesome. It also wants full sun, and it can spread very easily too. It's pretty tough. I like it a lot. It grows basically wherever you will let it. We had it growing in the back alley behind one of my schools through concrete. So it is super not fussy. That's a great thing about native plants, by the way, is that most of them need almost no work. Like once they're established, pretty much they want to grow. They're supposed to be here anyway. They do not need fussed over. If you want to water them, you can, but it's awesome. I really like how low maintenance they are. Since I have 6 acres, I'm definitely not going to be out there watering 6 acres of these. So it makes me happy that they can take care of themselves. And then just another good one is kind of a general, but so any native sunflowers, we have a ton of them. Downy sunflower, sawtooth sunflower, early sunflower. But these are native sunflowers, meaning they are going to, oh yeah, I see. Boneset is also medicinal. I am not going to recommend any medicinal uses. Use at your own risk. Look it up. Get an expert. Leaves for Wildlife is a great natural medicinal plant expert here in the area. Look up Patty Hagopian Shipley. Anyway, native sunflowers are considered a keystone species, meaning they support some of the most animals of all the plants. And they're super easy to grow, super not fussy. They can spread up to 10 feet a year if you go with a sawtooth sunflower. So that'll fill in a spot very nicely, very quickly. And they will just bring the bees, bring the butterflies, bring all the seed-eating birds. Awesome. I love native sunflowers. I have bags and bags of the stuff that'll be planted here soon. I'm excited about it. Also, they're super tough. They don't need any care at all. Almost impossible to kill. I love it. Now, one thing to mention though, with a lot of those plants that I just showed you, is that those plants, you notice that I said they need almost no care once established. A lot of these plants, that first year, you're not going to see the pretty flowers. And that is not because they are struggling or dying, and not because you did something wrong, but because that first year, many of these plants focus on their roots. So all the action's happening underground. On top, you're just going to see a little green guy. Not a whole lot's going on. But if you don't want to wait for year 2 or even sometimes year 3 for the blooms, if you want blooms like in 2021, there are choices that you can still use this milk jug for and still get some awesome things. So there's partridge pea, like we talked about. And partridge pea will bring the bumblebees. It'll bring the birds. It'll bring all kinds of awesome animals to eat the peas in these pods and the nectar. And this will bloom the first year. It's an annual, which means that you can let it sow its seeds again, or you can re-sow it. It only needs stratified for 10 days, but it wants to grow. It is super hardy, will pretty much grow anywhere. It just likes the sunshine, but other than that, super easy. Brown-eyed Susan and black-eyed Susan, kind of like sisters. Both of these are super duper easy. I've literally thrown seed on the ground, walked away, had plants in a couple of weeks. So these guys need very short time of stratification. You should still do the milk jug. But these will bring all kinds of awesome bees and butterflies. They don't grow super tall. They grow about 2 to 3 feet. They can last for a very long time, though, as far as the bloom period, which is awesome. Then one other one who's an early bloomer, lance leaf coreopsis, will bring all kinds of bees. It can be dry. It can pretty much grow anywhere. And you will start seeing it in May and early June. And I just think they're really pretty. I like that fringed edge. It'll bring butterflies and stuff. And they will reseed themselves if you let them, pretty much with no problem. So they want to spread. They want to be there. But again, like I said, this is recorded. And there are lots of great sources for you to find other seeds that'll work for your property. I'll go over that at the end. So if you miss what I just said, don't worry. Well, let's cut up some jugs. So the way that you're going to do this, there's a handout that I believe was probably sent out to everyone. It has step-by-steps as well, but I kind of wanted to show you as well. So the way you are going to use your milk jug is the first thing you're going to do. Yes, there's lots of good semi-shade. We can get to that. And like I said, there's some great sources for this too. I am not the only person who knows about native plants in Central Ohio. We are very fortunate to have lots of passionate people here right around us. Yes. So what you're going to do, though, let me look through my mad scientist pile of things, is first, you are going to put some drain holes. Drain holes are super important because what you don't want, once you set this outside, the rain is supposed to fall in. You're going to take the cap off. That is very important. Do not leave the caps on. Just recycle it, make it go away so you're not tempted to put it back on. Cap's off. So cap is off. And that means that the rain and the snow is going to get in because, like I said, those seeds have to be wet in order for them to grow the way they're supposed to. But they don't want to swim. So you got to put drain holes. I like to put 5. I like to put a drain hole in the middle. I like to put a drain hole at each corner. All right. Now, this is an art, not a science. What that means is there is a lot of different ways that people swear by to do this. I do it this way. If you want to do it a different way, I'm going to give you some resources at the end of where you can find information on this specifically with some other methods. The way I like to do it, though, 1 hole in the middle, 1 in each corner, 5 drain holes. It kind of mimics what a pot would do of this size. So once you have your drain holes, do that first because it's easier. I'm all about easier. Once you have made 5 drain holes, then you're going to use an X-Acto knife, scissors, whatever you want to do. Oh, by the way, drain holes, some people like to use an old glue gun with no glue in it or a soldering iron to melt the holes. If you do that, do it outside. The fumes are no good. You can also use a drill and a drill bit, about 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch, however you want to do it. Drill it in. That's what I do. You could poke and kind of twist scissors to make a kind of triangular shape, however you want to make holes. But they should be, a good, 1/3, 1/2 inch across, however you want to do it. Like I said, art, not a science. So, drain holes. After you have the drain holes, then you're going to cut this in half. It needs to have enough room to have 4 inches of dirt in it. So you're gonna wanna, you can measure up 4.5 inches. I like to do it just below the handle. Some people even do cutting the handle. It's up to you. You want at least 4 inches though for dirt. So you're gonna cut this in half and it's going to open. So I'm gonna see if I can do this quickly while we're on. Here we go. Yep, here we go. Cut it in half. So you're cutting your whole jug in half. It doesn't have to be pretty. These jugs are just a means to an end to get beautiful plants. The jugs are not important in of themselves as far as aesthetics. I cut it all the way in half. Some people cut it and leave about 1 inch for a hinge, which I'll explain why you would want a hinge. You've cut it in half. You're gonna fill this, remember with the drain holes, with 4 inches of dirt. Now, natives can be pretty not picky about dirt. They do not need fertilizer. So you don't have to get, you know, the fancy schmancy dirt with fertilizer. I believe if you already have Pro Mix or other things that has some fertilizer in it, I think it's fine. But you don't have to go out of your way to get fertilizer, and you absolutely do not need to add Miracle Grow or any other fertilizer to it. Those can actually make the plant die from having too much nitrogen and phosphorus or other things. So you're going to want to put dirt in here. Potting mix is great because it has things in it that help the drainage a little bit. So you're going to get your dirt in here. You can even use old dirt as long as it's sterile. You can look up methods for baking it to make sure there's no fungus or something in it, or you can just buy some dirt. We're going to get 4 inches of dirt in here. Then you're going to want, if you're ready to plant and you have your seeds, you're going to want to get this wet. Don't get it sopping wet, standing water, but get it wet. Once this is wet, then you're ready to plant your seeds. Most of these native seeds, especially most of the ones I just showed you, you just kind of put on top. You don't dig a hole or any of that. You just kind of lay it on top, because in nature, most native seeds are just laying on top. They fall off the plant, go to sleep on the dirt. They might be covered by some thatch. Eventually, they might have a little tiny dusting of dirt on top of them. But some of them even need light to germinate. So you're going to just, once you have your dirt and you get it wet, you're going to put your seeds in, maybe even give them a little pat. Don't poke them in, just give them a little pat. And you can sprinkle, especially some seeds are minuscule. You can sprinkle a bunch. If they're bigger, like some of the sunflower seeds, which are very easy to handle, you can just kind of place them throughout. So once you have those in, you can give it a little more of a misting, a little more water just to kind of set it. And then you're going to put your top back on. So once your top is back on, there's a couple of different ways you can get it to stay on. So you can duct tape it all around. You can punch some holes and put a twist tie. You can, some people even get really fancy. I'm not this fancy, but some people get fancy and cut a slit in the top, tuck it over itself, tuck it in. I'm not that fancy. If you want to try to do it, go ahead. Art, not a science, so you are free to do as you please. The main thing is what you want is you want the top to be easily able to open and then close back up. Now, the reason you're going to want to do that is because once you have these planted and all of that stuff is done and you have figured out a way to close it, you are setting these outside somewhere in the shade, but not covered with a roof. You want the rain and the snow to get in there. Now, you don't want them to blow away. So some people put them in milk crates. Some people put little logs around them. That's what I did. Some people put them in an area, like on a patio where they are a little bit blocked from prevailing winds. But you definitely want them to be able to get moisture inside. They don't have to be in sunshine when you're doing natives. So you can put them in the shade, put them protected from wind, where they are going to get snow and rain on them. And you're going to put them out. And then you're going to forget them and just let them sit there until the spring. You don't have to water them. You don't have to do anything. They're going to get watered by Mother Nature. Now, come spring, probably around April-ish, you're going to start checking these for sprouts, which is really exciting. I can't wait. I have, I'll show you a picture, which, by the way, you don't have to use milk jugs. If you don't have milk jugs, you can use, those big vinegar things. You can cut them just like this. You can use old spinach containers. Just you need drain holes, and you have to cut holes on top for the water to get in. There's lots of different containers to use. I even have giant under the bed Rubbermaid totes that I've drilled holes in the top and bottom. It's up to you what you want to use. It's an experiment. But anyway, you're going to want to put these out somewhere, and you want them to have drainage underneath. So you don't want to stick them in the mud. You're going to want these to be on a patio. I have mine on a pallet. Here's my setup. I've got tons of jugs, tons of stuff. You don't have to go this big. You can do one if you want, but you want it to be able to drain. So you put this somewhere in the shade where it can drain, closed up. Come April, you're going to check for sprouts. If you have sprouts, that's super exciting. Animal parties will be on their way soon. But when you have your sprouts, you can start to open these up during the day if you want to maybe get a little bit more air. Or if you don't want to do that, you can just leave them closed. Some people just leave them closed. But if you do choose to open them and you feel like, I wanted them to get a little bit air or maybe more water this way. And if you do open them to check if they are watered because they can dry out in the spring. If you do choose to open them up and leave them open for a while, make sure you close them at night if it's going to get below freezing that night. Anything below like 34. Even though that's a little above freezing, that's what hurts plants. So anything below 34-ish, you're going to want to close them up at night because even native baby plants, when containers, can get sad from the cold. So you're going to check them for moisture starting in April. If they're dried out, water them. If it's rained recently, they should be fine. But you don't want them to dry out in here. So you're going to check them for moisture. You can close them back up all day if you want. You can leave them open, close them up at night if it's going to freeze. Now that's going to probably happen all through April, probably through mid-May here in Ohio. Now come mid-May or even beginning of June, these are going to start to get a little bit taller and get some true leaves. At first, they're just going to be these little tiny pipsqueaks with like 2 little tiny leaves. Nothing's really happening. They're not ready to go in the ground yet. But once they have a couple of true leaves, meaning the leaves of what they're really going to look like when it's grown up, and once they're about 2 to 3 inches tall, that'll be, like I said, about mid-May, even beginning of June, depending like if you do milkweed. Once they get 2 to 3 inches tall, they're ready to be transplanted. Now, some people might look at a milk jug and be like, how in the world am I going to get plants out of that milk jug without crumbling and destroying the plant that I worked hard to have? So I have good news. It's actually really easy. So the way that most people who do winter sowing, there's a massive winter sowing community, which I'll tell you about in just a minute. But the way that most people transplant is called hunk of seeds methods. And it's exactly what it sounds like, because you're going to sprinkle seeds in here. So this whole thing will probably be sprouting up. So instead of trying to pull seeds out and expose their roots, don't do that. And instead of trying to like cut out each little tiny postage stamp size little nugget of soil, don't do that. You're just going to literally cut this like brownies and transplant a whole chunk, a whole hunk with multiple little seedlings in it and go stick it in an appropriate size hole where you want it in your garden. So how do you do that? You just dig the hole about the same. You dig it a little bit extra wider to disturb the soil a little bit, but you want it to be level. So you want the flat top of the soil where the sprouts meet the soil. You're going to want that to be level with where you planted it. So just dig the hole deep enough for that. So probably about 4 inches. So you're going to cut this into hunks, stick it in 4-inch holes where you want it. Remember to take into account if that plant likes sun, it's going to need sun at that point. And then there you go. For the ones that need to establish for about a year, you might want to look at it, see if it ever gets droopy, maybe give it some water. It should be pretty well no fuss though. For these guys, like the lance leaf coreopsis, who are going to bloom your first year, they should be absolutely no fuss. You should be able to plant it and enjoy it. And those ones can even be transplanted a little bit earlier, maybe even in April. You'll be able to tell with them getting about 2 inches, 3 inches tall. If this looks crowded, you might be able to transplant it right away. That could even be at the end of April for some of these annuals. So it's kind of a crash course in how to do this. There are so many great resources that I have found. One of the things that I love, one of my biggest takeaways that I love about the native plant community is just how generous and caring and like-minded everyone in the community is. Like everyone in the native plant community has the same goal, like help the world, help pollinators, save the bees, like all these things, you know, and planting native plants is a measurable, real way to actually help the world right now. You're not just donating to some far off charity, which can still be great, but this is actually doing something that you can see the results in your yard. I have someone I know named Carolyn Turner who did this to her entire yard over the course of several years. And her yard is this crazy oasis of just wildlife awesomeness. So you can do that too, but you can also start small. And so anyway, there's so many people who want to help you with this. And so one main place where I've gotten so much of my information is the Winter Sowers group on Facebook. So just search Winter Sowers, S-O-W-E-R-S. There's 36,000 members. It's huge. And they are so willing. There are so many experts who've been doing this for decades on there. And they are so willing. You post a, hey, how do I blah, blah, blah. Even if it's a basic question, nobody is like, how do you not know that? Everyone there is so kind and so knowledgeable, and you will get a flood of answers. Like I said, there's some different ways people do it. So you might get some different opinions of a way you can try it. But for the most part, native plants want to grow and they want to be here. So most of these different variations should still work. So Winter Sowers group on Facebook is great. Definitely check out Talamy's books at the Westerville Public Library. You can buy his books. I love to always promote IndieBound, IndieBound.org. You can see it right there, IndieBound.org. That's probably flipped, but you know. IndieBound.org to look for Talamy's books. You can look up me, Jared Goodykoonts, on there too. You can find my books. That supports local businesses, so I like that a lot. But definitely look at Talamy's books. He has some straightforward advice about all of this. And then on the handout, you'll see two places. OPN Seed, OPN, S-E-E-D. They are our local awesome nursery, Ohio Prairie Nursery. So they have all these seeds that I just mentioned. They carry all of them. You can buy little packets for a small space. You could buy an acre's worth. But they are awesome. And if you see that, the handout will be mailed to everyone. So it will be available to you soon. Oh, emailed, even better, even more environmentally friendly. So it will be emailed to everybody. So you'll be able to see all these things written out. But OPN Seed, they have great customer service. You can buy every seed I showed you just now and tons more natives. It tells you if they need shade, tells you if they need sun, it tells you what kind of soil they need. It tells you who they attract, gives you beautiful pictures. Awesome. OPN Seed, like I said, you can buy almost any amount you want. They even have alternatives for how to convert your lawn into like things you don't have to mow and things that help the bees, clover, awesome stuff. So OPN Seed is great. And then Gail Martin of Natives in Harmony. She is super generous, amazingly knowledgeable. Ohio Prairie Nursery, yeah. And like I said, I'll answer questions here in a minute. But Gail Martin of Natives in Harmony, nativesinharmony.com, I believe. You can Google her. And there should be information in the handouts that'll be emailed to you. She is like the guru of Central Ohio. She's based in Marengo. She's building an education center out there, but she already has a nursery. She will answer questions. She's a good source for plugs, which are already grown plants, or seeds, and tell you about that. She will stress, and I'll put a little information about it now, that you kind of want to get seeds that are like raised in Ohio. You can buy native seeds from, Wisconsin, Minnesota, that are plants that are supposed to grow here too. But buying from OPN or sourcing through her or getting from your neighbor or whoever will be seeds of plants that have adapted specifically to Central Ohio. So black-eyed Susan seeds from Minnesota will still grow here and will still help bees. But black-eyed Susan seeds from a black-eyed Susan that grew and originated here in Ohio will help them just that little bit even more. So that's something to look out for. But yeah, there's other groups like Ohio Native Seed Exchange and landscaping with native plants in Ohio. And if you search native plants in Ohio on Facebook or search native plants Ohio in Google, there are so many awesome sources. And it looks like Gail is a speaker here next month. Perfect. That's awesome. Oh yeah, definitely not opium seed. Don't do that. OPN seed. OPN seed. It'll be on the handout. Don't do illegal things. So anyway, yeah, OPN seed. And like I said, their customer service is amazing. They'll tell you how to plant it. They will give you recommendations. Like, they are awesome. They want to help you. So anyway, that is kind of how to use a milk jug to save the world. That was kind of a crash course. The handout will be emailed to you, I believe Jessica said. So hopefully that should be coming today, I hope. That'll make it helpful. There will be seeds available for you to pick up at the library in 2 weeks, but you can also get them at these other sources very cheaply, $3 packet of seeds that could fill an area of your garden from OPN Seed. So yeah, they are readily available for you. Like I said, milkweed seeds at the library in 2 weeks. But yeah, let's throw some animal parties. Let's help the world. Like, this is exciting. Like, if you have kids or grandkids, like, you could plant a couple of these plants and invite them outside to connect with nature with you and watch the hummingbirds. Like, I sat outside by my jewelweed this past summer and got to watch 4 different hummingbirds buzzing around, having their little bickerments and their little buzzing around each other and trying to woo each other. And it was amazing. I got to take my 4-year-old daughter out into my prairie. I have a 8,000 square feet prairie. I'm very blessed. You might not have that. That's fine. A pocket prairie of 8 square feet is still helpful. But I was able to take my daughter out, and I have this big planting of native plants with these coreopsis and black-eyed Susan. And we were able to meet praying mantises, a bunch of native ladybugs, which is pretty cool, a bunch of bees, a bunch of all kinds of butterflies. Like, it was amazing. Like, you plant these plants, and they will come. Some of these do spread. So I would suggest, as far as invasive, none of these are invasive in the bad sense of they're not supposed to be here and hurt the environment. Some of them are invasive, which I don't even like to use that word. Some of them are aggressive in that they want to spread, like milkweed. So you want to give those some room, although they can be controlled if you want to keep them in one area. That can be done. But I'm not going to open it to moderated questions. And yeah, I also actually, you know what? 1 second, before I open it to moderated questions, I told you I'm a mad scientist, so I'm a little bit all over the place. But if you find me on Instagram at Jared the Nature Guy, all one word, no spaces or anything, at Jared the Nature Guy, like, you can send me messages and I'll be happy to like talk to you directly about this stuff too. Because this is my passion. I'm always happy to talk to people. Yep, there you go. I am always happy to talk to people about this. So send me a message. But anyway, let's open it up to moderated questions. So what do you want to know? Did I talk super fast? Do you want to find opium seeds? Because I can't tell you where to find those. But if you have questions, I'd love to hear.
All right, I do have some questions that came in, and somebody asked, what was the coreopsis that was mentioned?
Yes, lance leaf coreopsis. So scientific name, coreopsis, I believe lanceolata. It's available on any seed website, OPN seed. Yeah, it's very easy to find.
Okay. And somebody asked, do you have any recommendations for deer? Now, I don't know if that means recommendations to bring deer or which ones deers won't eat. So
if you're looking for recommendations to bring deer, pretty much any green plant. If you are looking for recommendations to repel deer, now a hungry deer will nibble almost anything. Now, the good news is a lot of these native plants adapted to be to survive grazing pressure, which means if they get the tops bit off, they will grow back. I've watched it happen. But some of these plants make the deer like the deer don't even want to mess with them because of their texture or their taste. So the common milkweed I suggested is actually mildly toxic. So it's called milkweed because the sap inside is white, and deer leave it alone. The cutleaf coneflower that brings the beneficial insects, it is a really rough texture. The deer will pretty much leave it alone. Black-eyed Susan seem to sometimes get nibbled the heads off, sometimes not. They tend to recover quickly, though. I believe the boneset, however you want to say it, is pretty well deer resistant. The great news is that if you Google it, or if you look up I have dogs, and there they are. If you look up any of these seeds on OPN Seed, they have suggestions for which ones are deer resistant, and they even have mixes of seeds that you can buy that are specifically deer resistant.
Okay, thank you. I had another question. Somebody asked, I'm going to interpret this as, can you use opaque containers, or do they have to be transparent or translucent?
Need to be transparent or translucent. It's okay if it's, like a milk jug where it's cloudy and it's not completely see-through. It's also okay if it is completely see-through, like this spinach container.
What about the paper ones? Like the paper ones that are white, is that is it, or is that too thick for it to get through, like an orange juice container?
Those won't work as well for two reasons. One is it does need to have, you need light. Some of these seeds, they have to have light to germinate. So if they're in a container that just has a little hole in the top, it might not be enough light for them to germinate. But second, you wouldn't want to use a milk carton or an orange juice container, a carton, because they will break down outside very quickly and you'll have a pile of mush.
That's a good reason. Okay, somebody else asks, do you have any suggestions for urban lots?
So urban lots. So if you're talking about, is there any way to clarify a question through this?
Probably. So if you're the one who wrote that question, if you could clarify that in the chats, and I'll read you what it specifically said. It would milk or orange juice containers work effectively? So
milk jug, yes. Orange juice containers, no, unless it's a plastic clear one. For urban lots, though, I'm curious. So if you mean a plant suggestion for a small space, or do you mean a plant suggestion for terrible soil? What are you talking about? Small space. I see it. Perfect. So small space, there's definitely plants that aren't going to try to spread like crazy. Whoops, I dropped my milk in. There's definitely ones that are not going to spread like crazy. So like the black-eyed Susans and the brown-eyed Susans, they are going to make seeds. But you can either cut the seed heads off. Same thing with milkweed even. You can cut the seed heads off so that they're not going to drop the seed and spread a bunch. Or you can, like for the black-eyed Susan and the brown-eyed Susan, you can leave them and the birds will eat most of them. Same thing with like the gray-headed coneflower and things like that. I'm just giving you a snapshot of like the native plants. There are hundreds of species of native plants. And so if you want to keep them in a small space without them like taking over, the only ones that I would make sure to avoid are the milkweeds and the mint family. So, and you'll be able, for wherever you source your seeds from, you'll be able to find out. And a lot of these, like OPN will tell you if these are aggressive. You contact Gail, she'll tell you if these are aggressive. You join one of these Facebook groups, they'll tell you if it's aggressive. Two websites that I love to use for information, maybe not necessarily getting your seeds from, but for information are Everwild, Everwilde, and you search for a plant. It'll tell you all the information about it. Izel Plants, IZELPLANTS. Search that on Google. They have a great, you can search for Ohio plants, and it has a great database that tells you if they're aggressive, tells you if they're deer resistant, tells you all these amazing things about them. And then Prairie Moon Nursery, you can buy seeds from them, but again, they're going to be from, I believe, Minnesota. So it's okay to get seeds from them, but it's best to get them from Ohio. But Prairie Moon Nursery will also tell you if they're deer resistant or if they're aggressive or things like that. So if you're dealing with a small space and you absolutely do not want a plant that's going to be aggressive, any of those sources are great. But you can go with some of these annuals too, like I said, like the brown-eyed or like the partridge pea and things like that, and those will be a little less aggressive. Sorry, that was really long-winded, but I just want you to know that there's so many resources for you.
All right, thank you. So somebody says that they will, do you know of anything that'll grow under walnut trees?
So everyone thinks that walnut trees are, these big bad guys of allelopathy. Allelopathy is the fancy word of putting chemicals in the soil that makes it so other plants can't grow. And so the chemical in question with a walnut tree is jugalone. And so a long time ago, there was some people who were planting, and they noticed that they didn't think their plants under a walnut tree grew as well. But current evidence and studies seem to point more to the shade and maybe the extra foot traffic due to the nuts being more of the reason. And so in controlled lab settings, jugalone has been shown to inhibit the growth of some roots of plants. But that's controlled lab settings. I was just talking to a PhD botany professor about this, and she said that modern science considers allelopathy, like walnut trees, to mostly be not significant. So basically, any native that should be able to grow in shade, like tall bellflower, wild columbine, trying to think, cutleaf coneflower actually grow in shade very well. Tall ironweed, and like I said, all these sources I've mentioned have great ways to find shade plants. But basically, any plant that should be able to grow in shade should be able to grow under a walnut tree.
Thank you. Somebody else asked, what about plants where if it gets eaten, will most plants grow back?
So most of these plants, if they get topped off, even high mowed, like if they got mowed to down to 8 inches tall, most of them will recover. A lot of these native plants that are recommended for people's yards originated hundreds of years ago in prairies, and they originated having to adapt to being eaten by buffalo, technically bison, and deer and other large mammals. So yes, they should be able to recover from being the tops chewed off. Now, if the entire thing gets chewed up by, a deer all the way to the ground, or if those roots get pulled out, that plant's probably not going to make it. So there's ideas for homemade repellents. Please don't spray chemicals, but there are ideas for homemade repellents. But also, there's certain plants that actually repel them just by existing. A lot of like bergamot, wild bergamot, deer hate it. And so if you plant bergamot around the edge, or even if you plant basil or short tooth mountain mint or these other plants, deer mostly will leave them alone, and they usually will not walk through bergamot to go get to a slightly better tasting plant. So there's a lot of like strategic chess playing you can do with this. And then another thing I would say about that is, as far as being eaten by caterpillars, like you kind of want that to happen. So if you see leaves getting chewed by caterpillars, your plant's doing its job, what it's designed for. So don't freak out if your milkweed is getting almost all the leaves eaten by monarch caterpillars. That milkweed will come back next year and will help even more monarch caterpillars. But if you flick those caterpillars off or freak out and try to get them out of here, like you're ruining the animal party.
Okay, somebody asks, what are your thoughts about neem oil, NEEM?
So neem oil is a insecticide. It's more natural, but as a non-expert in pesticide application, what I would say is try to go with non-chemical, and I would consider neem a kind of chemical first, because one of my main motivations for native plants isn't the prettiness. They are pretty, and that is awesome. But also, I want them to feed the butterflies and the moths and the hummingbirds. And that neem oil and things are going to hurt them too. So I would say, like, if you get aphids going nuts, sucking the juice out of your milkweed or other plants, you can spray them with soapy water, or even just spray them with a hose, and they can fall off. You can squish them, you can flick them, depending on what you want to do. But I would definitely try all of the non-chemical methods first. And like I said, you plant these cutleaf coneflowers, you plant this bone set, any of that, and you're going to attract those beneficial predators, these parasitoid wasps, these soldier beetles that are going to come, and they're not going to sting you. They're not going to sting your dog. They're not going to sting your kid, but they are going to eat the pests, the non-caterpillars that you don't want.
Thank you. Somebody mentioned that they have some echinacea that's kind of growing wild. Do you recommend, or is the recommendation that you let it run its course, or can you, kind of whatever the opposite of crowding is, call those?
It's your choice. It's your choice what you want to do. It's your garden. So I am not here to be a judge, but I'm just here to give you best practice from my point of view. I personally say let it crowd, because real native plants grow in an awesome crowded field of like a forest. So super cultivated manicured gardens where each flower is showcased with lots of bare ground or mulch around it is not how nature works, and you're helping less pollinators that way. Letting it crowd and have it be a symphony of colors and flower heads all right next to each other, awesome. Helps so many. You might even get to see emerald wavy moth caterpillars. They're called kamloopers. They will take your echinacea and take little pieces off of it and sew themselves a suit. They literally wear it on their head to blend in. That will happen, and you'll get so many other awesome animal friends by letting it crowd. But you can also, if you want to get generous, you can dig out the ones you don't want and share with a neighbor. You can harvest the seeds and share with a neighbor or with a family member.
Okay. If somebody asks if you know of any flowers shaded flowers that bloom in fall.
Shaded flowers that bloom in fall. That's a good question. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. So, if I remember correctly, white snakeroot, I believe, is a really good late season one. New England aster and some of the goldenrods, which, by the way, goldenrod does not cause allergies. It's insect pollinated, not wind pollinated. So you could plant goldenrod to your heart content and you will not make yourself sneeze. But anyway, yeah, New England aster, and cutleaf coneflower to some degree. But a lot of those, they will bloom in the fall and they can bear shade. But I want to keep directing you to this OPN seed. I want to keep directing you to Gail Martin. I want to keep directing you to the native plant community here in Central Ohio that will be able to answer those questions even better, more specific. I want to show you this real quick. So I printed it off. Oh, 1 second. You may have lost me. Let me see if I can fix this. All right. Am I back? Haha. Okay. The Marianist Environmental Education Center. So that's a long and fancy. Marianist Environmental Education Center. They have native plant catalog and all this information on their website. And they're usually referred to as the MEEC. They will tell you when it blooms. They will tell you when the plant, if it needs shade. They will tell you who it brings. If you even request a seed catalog from Prairie Moon Nursery, even if you don't want to buy from them, if you go on their Prairie Moon Nursery's website and request a free catalog, in a couple of days, they'll send you a catalog. Big, beautiful catalog. Looks like this. Here, let me get it out of my mad scientist. But looks like this. And this will show you pictures of the plants. It'll tell you if they need shade. It'll tell you how wet they need to be. And it'll tell you who they will attract. It'll tell you if they're deer resistant. So I don't store a lot of that information in here because so many people have put it in here.
Okay. Somebody asks, can you start any veggies in the milk jug method?
Yes, a lot of people actually do it that way. I don't know almost anything about that because my focus is habitats and native plants, but there's nothing wrong, of course, with having a vegetable and herb garden. And actually, some of these plants will help your vegetable and herb garden by bringing in the bees to pollinate your squash, bringing in the beneficial predators like we talked about to eat those bugs eating your vegetables. But you can totally do that. It's a little early to do that now. But like I said, I'm going to hesitate to give any more advice about that because I don't do it. So all of my advice would be hearsay. But if you go on that Winter Sowers Facebook group with 36,000 people, thousands and thousands and thousands of them do vegetables, and they'd be able to answer any of your questions about timing and exactly how. And then wintersown.org, I believe it is, or .com. But Winter, SOWN, is a whole website with a bunch of information about how to do it for herbs and vegetables.
Okay. Somebody else asks, so do you have a blog?
So I do most of my stuff is through that @Jared the Nature Guy on Instagram. However, if you don't have an Instagram, I do a monthly blog through my schools. If you go to balancedfamilyacademy.com and you go to the nature section, you'll find my blog and a bunch of information about what I'm doing is right there. So that's Balanced Family Academy altogether.com. Go to the nature tab. You'll find all my stuff. There's a blog post on there with some more nitty-gritty details about this too.
All right. Thank you. I did have another, going through the questions.
Yeah.
Do you have any opinions on something like Zuber compost in spring?
No, because I don't know what that is.
Yeah. Okay.
I know what compost is.
Yeah. Any special soil preparation for starting a native bed? Like before you take your brownie and put it in the ground?
Yeah. So the only thing you're going to make sure is that you get some of those weeds out. So you're going to want to pull out, you can use one of those nice little things. I would suggest against, if you're doing, especially in small scale, I would suggest against herbicides. Those will hurt those bugs that we want to. But, pull them out, make sure it's weed free. And then other than that, should be good to go. As long as it has the sun that plant needs, should be good to go. Just get rid of those weeds.
Gotcha. All right. Let me check through this once more. Do you know if homegrown or harvested seeds have an expiration date?
Yes, some of them do. So for example, Leatris, which is called Blazing Star, these big, awesome purple spikes, they last less than a year. So when you gather them, you have to plant them the next year. Some of these, though, can last a lot longer. These were all gathered this year. I have in these drawers, so they're not being refrigerated. If you make sure that your seeds that you gather, if you're not ready to plant them for years for some reason, if you make sure they're completely dry, which means you just let them sit out like in a brown paper bag or something for a very long time, like weeks and weeks and weeks, if you know they're completely dry, you can put them in the freezer and they can last for like 10 years. But they have to be completely dry, because if they're not, of course, in the freezer, water expands, seed explodes.
Okay. All right. And somebody asked, what is the full name of the book by the Marianist Education?
Yes. There it is. This is actually just the 2020 Native Plant Catalog. Okay. So, but they have other publications. If you find their website, you just Google that, or MEEC, Native Plants. They have a lot more stuff. And again, they're part of this super generous community. You reach out to them, I'm sure they would be happy to answer questions specifically and help you out. Let me mention one more thing real quick as far as sources. The Ohio Prairie Association is an awesome local association you can join for free. They also have biologists on there who are happy to help you. And you know what? I'm going to do two more just because there's so many people who want to help you. The Franklin County Soil and Water Conservation District, FSWCD, they also are here to help you. And they have a whole pollinator network for native plants. They want to help you. So send them a message, go to their website. They are here to help you. And the last one is Talamy, who wrote Nature's Best Hope and Bringing Nature Home. These amazing books that I recommend to everyone. They're available at Westerville Library. He has a website called Homegrown National Park. Once you plant your native plants, you can register and actually become part of his national park, and you'll find more resources there.
All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody. We are out of time. So thank you all for coming. Jared, thank you. Very good job. Really appreciate it. And very intrigued.
Let me say real quick, also make sure to get these jugs out as soon as possible. As soon as you get seeds, get them outside.
Yep. Also, Google is your friend, especially if you put in the word stratification and whatever plant it is you're thinking of doing, it'll tell you. All right. Well, again, everybody, thank you so much for coming. And Jared, very good job. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody.
All right. Goodbye.